Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Martin Dreyfus Show. I know it's been a while. I've been gone, but the war is still here. It is still as serious as ever, and I'm still wanting to talk about it. Now, I've been gone because I've been affiliated with some news outlets, and you can't be giving your opinion when you're affiliated in school, but right now I'm not, so we can come back and talk about this, and I'm very excited to do so. A lot of the war hasn't changed since we last happened. Now, of course, a lot more people are dead, a lot more fighting has happened. However, Kharkiv is still one of the main battleground cities. A lot of fighting is still happening around the border. Now, if you recall back to the beginning of the war, Russia had a 40-mile long convoy of tanks and armored trucks and soldiers heading into the capital, Kyiv, in Ukraine. However, that stalled out. We were told there wasn't enough gas, and in time, it was blown up, ransacked, and the convoy was dismantled, which allowed Ukraine, in my estimation, to establish its defenses, and now we are engaged in a more long-term war. Now, throughout that time, the United States, along with other countries, have given billions and billions of dollars in foreign aid and supplies to Ukraine to help fight this war, which has caused a whole nother debate within this war as well as within the Israel-Gaza war. It's kind of a dual-wielding thing right now with the foreign aid. And really, the main thing I want to focus in on is the newest news around this war. It's Anthony Blinken, the United States Secretary of State. He went to Kyiv and he met with Zelensky. So right now, with all that being said, thank you for coming back. It's been a long time. Let's get right on into the news.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited Kyiv today to highlight U.S. support for Ukraine and reassure officials that aid is coming. He met with President Volodymyr Zelensky, who thanked Washington for passing a nearly $61 billion military aid package. Blinken's visit comes as Russia pushes forward with its new offensive in northern Kharkiv.
So that kind of gives us the recap we were at already, right? Blinken going in to meet with Zelensky, another $60 billion given to Ukraine, and right now Kharkiv is our battleground city. So that's what we're going to kind of start immersing ourselves in as we get back into the surface of this war. But as you know on this channel, I'm much more interested in the details, and that is what we'll be seeking out. But that is kind of the surface level of what I can assess from my research on where we are today.
CBS News foreign correspondent Chris Livesay joins us from Rome with more on reporting on this. Chris, I keep thinking, I mean, one thing is showing up, and that's important. Talk to us about what this visit from Blinken is doing as he meets with Zelensky, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions about, okay, but where's the aid?
Okay. Glad we got
Hey,
to it.
Lily. Yeah, well, one thing that Blinken was sure to mention is that a lot of this aid, $61 billion to be precise, has already made its way into Ukraine, and more of it is coming. He said that difference will certainly be felt on the battlefield, where they need air support more than anything, according to Zelensky's.
So, based off of that, I just want to make it clear, that's what he's been asking for since the beginning of this war. We sent missiles, I believe, in the beginning of the war, it started with lower level missiles and it increased in power. Again, we're still kind of getting back into this, but even then, he was asking for air support to stop the bombing, to stop the missiles. He just doesn't have the air support needed. So, although we're funding, I'm sure, hundreds of billions of dollars at this point, we still have yet to tackle what Zelensky has said is the biggest issue. Not sure where the blame falls in that. Not sure if there's blame to be placed in that. Just something I want to point out.
Crying out for more air defenses as his people and soldiers are coming under bombardment. But this is also a face-saving visit. Bear in mind that this is aid that had been stalled in the halls of Congress for many, many months. And in that period of time, Russia was able to take advantage of Ukraine, and we're now seeing the results of that.
It's a very interesting way of putting it. So I've been covering local Arizona news, mostly in the local government. A lot of news has been happening around other topics, but to hear that Congress has stalled $61 billion in the funding makes sense. I know there's a lot of people who don't want to fund foreign wars. I know a lot of other I'm assuming legislation is the right word, is tied into these kinds of bills. These aren't merely just $61 billion to Ukraine. Here you go. There's usually hundreds of other things that could be tacked into there. That they use this headline to kind of hide some of that. So the fact that it was stalled in Congress makes me want to look at why and what was actually passed in the long term. Also, I don't know the damage that's been happening yet, but being that Kyiv is still getting bombed and bombarded, doesn't seem like Ukraine's really getting taken advantage of, only in the sense that they haven't really seemed to make ground to me. It's always a new Russian offensive, and it always seems to be very minimal progress. We'll see if this is any different.
Can you talk to us a little bit more about that situation on the front lines, and what impact has the delay in military aid had in Ukraine?
Well, it means that all of that massive progress that Ukraine made in the early months in the first year of this war, it wasn't reversed, but it was a massive setback. So, remember that Ukraine was the underdog to begin with, massively outgunned, outmanned by Russia. People thought that Russia would roll over Ukraine in a matter of days, and then almost miraculously, Ukraine was able to stand up to this Russian onslaught, largely.
All right. Again, this isn't miraculous. This is mathematics. We've sent the supplies, along with many other countries, to ensure that they could defend themselves. That's what Vladimir Putin says all the time. If you just stop sending stuff, this will be over in a few weeks. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. I'm just saying it's not a miracle. It's not out of thin air that this has happened. The weapons that have been provided, as it says in the lower third, make a real difference. And that's why they've still been defended. Now, the question of air support, I'm guessing, goes to, that's probably the line Russia has said, behind closed doors. Otherwise, we would have already provided that. I'm still very curious about the air support.
Thanks to United States support. But then that support came to a trickle and then was cut off completely. And it was in that period of time earlier this year that Russia was able to make some significant gains, namely around Kyiv.
I mean, I know we've been talking a lot about the war, but it never stops giving me chills when you see buildings blown out like this. And this isn't nearly the worst we've seen, throughout this war, but imagine, I live in an apartment. I couldn't imagine coming home and my window being blown out right here, and this is what I came home to. That's still the harshest part about this war. It's not just numbers, it is people dying. Soldiers are dying, citizens are dying, buildings are being destroyed. All this, when it ends, apparently has to be rebuilt, And for a lot of people, it can never be rebuilt. Their lives can never be rebuilt. No matter if this building is rebuilt, their lives are still destroyed. And it never stops giving me chills.
7 villages at least have fallen in that period of time. Kyiv had been this story of Ukrainian resilience. It was an area right on the front line with Russia. Much of the area had fallen to Russia. Ukraine had been able to reclaim this territory, and now it's seeing those gains fall back into the hands of Russia and what's become this blood.
So this map is very similar to what we saw. Now, the slight difference is Crimea has been controlled by Russia. That was from the get-go. I think you can see my cursor here, but if you look in the northern part along this Russian border occupation and past it, a lot of the battlegrounds have been along this border. Clearly it's the Russia-Ukraine border, it would make sense, and the cities here. This is why these two, I can't say that word, I'm sorry, but Kyiv and Vav, we'll call it for now, have been two mainly targeted cities. Now, this map is interesting to me because it looks like the battleground has shifted more towards the south. But again, limited knowledge on where we stand right now.
Bloody tug of war.
So on that, Chris, I mean, does the 61 billion, that is a big number. Does that signify a bridging of the gap of what Ukraine needs? What do they need to be successful?
Everything. I mean, in the military.
Well, they absolutely need more of it. Look, I mean, if you're trying to put a number on it, it's hard to say. It's less than 1% of the U.S. budget that's gone towards supporting Ukraine right now. So effectively, it's a rounding error. And from the...
Wow. They're calling, okay. You know what? I got you guys right here. So, total U.S. aid to Ukraine. Since in 2022, 113 billion in emergency spending and 61.7 billion in so $175 billion, according to CBS's reporter, is a rounding error. Okay. I don't think that's right. What are we? Annual budget. 6.2 trillion is our annual budget. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of going off on a tangent here in my head, and I'll get to you in a second. I'll tell you what it's all about. Wow, that's crazy. Our GDP is $25 billion now. We've increased 19. I guess that's because it's post-pandemic. I still, $175 billion. I mean, we got countless issues that could be going to in the United States. I just think a rounding error is a tough term to use for $175 billion. That's all.
Perspective of Ukraine, what's so mystifying about this is that not a single American troop has been lost in this fight so far. That is so important for American interests and for the interests of NATO. If Russia succeeds in...
All right, I'm not waiting. I just don't even know how I want to address this. No, we haven't had an American life lost in Ukraine. We're not fighting the war with people. We're fighting with technology. Look at the state of AI. And it's widely considered that the military is usually 25 to 50 years ahead of citizens in technology. They're killing people with drones. Why do they need soldiers? Now, on top of that, I'm not even going to get into all of my true feelings there, but it's important for perception, because if an American life was lost in Ukraine, the idea behind it is America would lose their mind over that. If an American life was lost in Ukraine, I think Russia would lose their mind over that. I don't think that's important at all, but
in plowing through,
you get 3 minutes to give your side of things, and this is
Ukraine and going beyond NATO's doorstep and into a NATO country, well, then you would have to see American troops on the ground, and we wouldn't be talking about billions. We'd be talking about many, many more billions, possibly trillions.
Without getting into too much and researching too much here, this kind of put us where we need to be. We know that Blinken is with Zelensky after now a very long stall in payments to Ukraine. They got the $113 billion. Now they got the $61 billion. while I'm talking to you about this, I want to look up the Ukraine GDP. So they have now received more than their 2022 annual GDP from the United States. So just put that in perspective. If we go back, I mean, their best year ever is $200 billion, 2021. Put that into perspective. 2014, they're in the war with Russia, 90 billion. They did slowly climb to 130. War started in 22, and that's just tanked their stuff. But they were up to 200 billion. The United States has provided them about 170 billion dollars. Blinken goes because it's been so long since we've sent that money to help them. And the same cities are still border towns. I don't know. My head is spinning because I don't think an American life being lost is that vitally important right now. I think a large part of what Ukraine is trying to do is win and join NATO. If Ukraine wins this war, it'd be hard to believe that that's not in their future. And plus, you don't want American lives in there because, to me, this is a proxy war. I'm just going to say it. A lot of these wars are just ways for America to fight people they want to fight without having to directly fight them. We're funding the war. I mean, it's that simple.